As you know, ladies and gentlemen, loyal viewers of the program, we are returning to Hammerland, AC and I, and look who we picked up on the way. It's none other than Bill Gudmundson, the international Judas himself of Bill's Kitchen. Bill, you're becoming a regular. It's like the second time in 2 weeks you've been on the show, and we are happy to have you. How you doing, sir?
And I did not even know that I was going to be on this show until Monday night because I sort of
that's how it works, Bill. They just hook you
weird. In. But thank you for having me back. I hope I can provide one or two tidbits.
I'm hoping for a lot more than that because we're talking about Quatermass. I got to pronounce it the way that Mr. Brian Donleavy pronounces it, or at least the people around him. Quatermass 2 from 1957. Now, we've talked about the Quatermass experiment from 55.
Yep.
We've talked about Quatermass and the Pit from 1967, but now we're going back and looking at the middle film in this series. And wow, it's definitely a middle film. And as the kids might say, I think it's a mid film. I'm relying on you, Bill, and you, AC. By the way, AC, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Bill, I have to say, I really love your shirt, even though I can only see the top two names. Rick, that is a fine piece of threadery. Well done.
It is one of my favorite articles of clothing.
And we have 4/26 coming up, which is, official Alien Day. So well done.
Yeah, they'll be re-releasing it. Sorry, plug for Alien Day. Not that Fox or Disney needs our help, but yeah, they're going to be showing it in theaters for a limited time. And also, I understand they're going to have like some footage or a teaser trailer for the new Alien Romulus coming out. So that'll be exciting. But yeah, AC, I cut you off again.
Oh, I was just going to say, Bill was probably asking, Ian, why did AC show you the first one and then the third one, but not the second one when we did our initial ride through Hammerland?
Did you ask me that, Bill? I don't remember.
I don't ask any questions about these things. It's I just have to take things as they are. But yeah, it is a little odd. But
Bill, do you have any ideas as to why I might have done that? Being a Quatermass fan as you are, I'm imagining.
Not really, other than maybe this is sort of the lesser of the three films.
I don't know that I'd even say that. It's just I wanted to give, because Quatermass and Quatermass 2 are very much, a pair. And I wanted to be able to show him an alternative vision, both the color version as well as seeing a different actor in the Quatermass role. So that was why I jumped, because I was like, either we're going to do a Quatermass Film Festival or I want to, show the two sides of Quatermass as done by Hammer.
Well, I think we did it exactly right, AC, because I really dug the Quatermass experiment, and I was a big fan of Quatermass in the Pit, as I recall. If we had watched these in sequential order, I don't know if I would have made it past the second one. You would have had to have said, "Oh no, it's really, really good." The third movie, I'm like, is it though? And I would have missed out.
So I'm getting the impression that you weren't as big a fan of Quatermass 2, aka Enemy from Space.
In fairness to the movie, the Val Guest film, I was in and out. It was the end of a very long day when I watched this over at Bill's place after a hearty dinner of pizza, and I was struggling because this is definitely one of those movies that feels like they had a very limited budget. They had exactly one location, and they just spent the entire movie running around that location and having meetings. And yeah, it wasn't my jam. It's very different than the other two Quatermass films, which I'm relying on you guys to tell me what I missed, tell me what I'm missing, and also what's your estimation of this? I will of course chime in as I can based on what I can recall.
Well, I feel like I've taken up a lot of air already. Bill, I'll let you dive in to start.
I do not have as harsh an opinion as Ian does, which is usually the case for almost everything in life. However, I didn't find this one as engaging. I think part of it, for me, a big part of it is Brian Donleavy. I heartily agree with Nigel Kneale that he just comes off in both of the films as just a big bully. He has one emotion, which is anger. And yeah, I mean, he just seems like a cop from a 1950s B picture in the United States. Although it's a little unfair, it's not that original of an idea. I think there's a lot of good original things in there. The whole idea of an alien having to be kept in this artificial or this methane-based atmosphere. I mean, normally aliens come to Earth and they just walk around with everybody. And this one said, no, that's probably not how it's going to work. And so the mystery up to there, I thought was pretty good. But yeah, I do find that like there's a certain amount of repetitiveness to it. You know, they get caught, they get chased, they get, you know, there's and just running around the oil refinery is not that interesting.
They do. Shell does get credit at the very end. There's a nice little title card. Thank you for letting us use her base.
They used I think the same refinery for the 6-part serial years before, and actually that's something that I would like to see now is the original serial, and it turns out that I have. And I've never watched this one. I've watched the Quatermass in the Pit one.
Same, yeah. I got the box set of the 3. Yep, that's the one. This
is excellent, by the way. This is amazing. The way that they restored it, and the film footage it's like motion picture quality. I mean, the lighting and everything, all of that, which gets lost into a video transfer. But when they redid this, but we're kind of going off.
Well, I watched the 3 Hammer films and the second, third, and then the Quatermass conclusion when we did a show called The Legacy, Quatermass Legacy, last year on my show. And yeah, watching especially like Quatermass in the Pit and the film version versus the TV version, it really does benefit from having more time to flesh things out. And the same is true of this film as well. I think to your point, like it can feel a little repetitive because they're trying to get everything compacted, and it feels very compacted in that regard. That said, I don't share Mr. Kneale's disapproval of Brian Donleavy. I understand why, and I really like watching what Andrew Keir does. It's a much more British presentation. But there's something about Donleavy, and what I like about it is that he has this kind of like no nonsense man of action energy that is constantly driving the narrative forward. And he's just impatient with anybody who tries to get in his way. You know, if they can't keep up with his brain or just take his more informed than you opinion, but that seems kind of in keeping with a brilliant scientist who's just impatient with the world and going, look, I know the answer already. You can go and do all your tests. I already have the answer. And there's something about that, especially coming from an American. I like that American arrogance. You know, him dropped into the UK and going, look, all you. Let me just tell you.
I think we just coined a phrase here: the Americans.
The Americans, nice.
Yes. But here's the thing: like, I don't, because Bill, did you just do the thing? I missed it. I stepped right over it. Can you do it again?
No.
Please? Damn it. All right. Anyway, one day I'm going to get it without talking over it. Okay. With the Quatermass experiment, I felt like I think it might have just been the overall story and the momentum of that story and the kind of the frantic search for this guy who's been taken over by this alien entity. It just felt like it was a much larger scope. Quatermass 2 feels like the movie they would have made as a proof of concept, like, hey, we can make this alien picture. It's going to do well enough. And then the next one, we can blow it out and have, you know, more movie. This felt like a giant step backwards. And I think that's why with Donleavy's performance, I'm fine with the establishing incidents. You know, he almost gets run off the road by this couple who's frantically driving away from this site where this meteor crashed, and the guy gets the kind of the V and the goo on his face, and he's sweating and passed out. That's all good. I liked the discovery of the meteorites that were coming to Earth, how they were, they weren't just rocks. There was something inside of them. I like the idea that Quatermass is developing this giant dome system for the government. And I think his funding's in jeopardy or something like that. And then he's out in the desert and he discovers, wait a second, someone has already built this.
Yeah.
How does that happen? I don't feel like maybe I missed something because I was asleep, but I feel like I missed, how did they know? Was it that they were stealing his plans and infiltrating the office as he was developing it? Is that what we're supposed to believe?
I think so. And also what I like about this one is that it is kind of, it's trafficking in the same terrain as Invasion of the Body Snatchers, which had come out the year before,
Right.
but the teleplay was, I believe, 54. And so the concept of the Body Snatchers, I don't remember when the actual Jack Finney novel came out, but that idea of it had made it to the small screen in England before it made it to the big screen in the US. However, now it feels like, okay, this is Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but it's worth remembering that Nigel Kneale did get there before Don Siegel and I forget who our screenwriter for Invasion of the Body Snatcher is, but
well, and that's sort of what I was talking about with regards to this being a sequel, but feeling like a first film. It's almost unfair to criticize it for being too much like Body Snatchers, as you're saying, but it definitely feels like, okay, someone watched this and then evolved it with not necessarily the 56 version, because obviously, but the paranoia, the one from the 70s and other iterations. Right. I mean, that's the frustrating / fascinating thing here. I feel like I'm watching a new concept kind of be born and like these great little seeds that other people would run with later. But just in the execution, particularly in the end with the refinery, it's like, I get it. I just wanted more scope. I will say the weird guards that are guarding this installation, they look really cool and kind of terrifying, and they have these weird backpacks with all sorts of like piping and stuff on them. This movie's very strange, but not strange in a way that kept me alert for 85 minutes.
Well, and the Body Snatcher idea, it's worth mentioning, like it actually, it goes back as far as it came from outer space and Invaders from Mars, where aliens were coming in and taking over people's brains, either inhabiting them or like just controlling them with like a little device in the back of their neck.
Well, now I've seen these movies, but I'm not sure on the timeline. Like these are all the 1950s, right?
The two I just mentioned, Invaders from Mars and It Came from Outer Space, are both 53. So they're right at the edge of like the sci-fi explosion.
So, which makes me wonder, like if, and we're talking about the lineage of these things, but it almost sounds like
Nigel Kneale might have been inspired by those.
Or just, I'm just wondering, like being alive in the early 1950s and seeing these movies come out, first like, oh my gosh, aliens are coming to the planet and taking over. And then 4 years later, you're like, great, another movie about aliens coming to the planet and taking over people.
Right. I mean, it's true. But I think, I think it's one of those evergreen concepts where somebody that we know suddenly is not the person that we knew, and they become somebody else, or they're being controlled by somebody else. So yeah, I still like this movie. I agree it has a different feel to it, but I do like the concept of the meteorites coming down and like the gas escaping and that scarring you and literally marking you as being part of the other. And go ahead.
No, please finish your thought.
I don't know that I had more to say, so go ahead.
No.
Well, one thing that, like the aliens taking over bodies thing is such a, it goes back. I'm not sure. Like I know Jack Finney's book goes back probably
54. Is that when it was written?
Maybe. Robert Heinlein wrote a book called The Puppet Masters that was basically the same thing. And so in Quatermass 2, it's almost kind of a throwaway thing. It's not the main point of the thing. So I wouldn't criticize the movie on, like not being original in that case.
Yeah.
Because, they're just there. They're basically there as guards, as well as infiltrating the government, obviously. And from what I've understand, like that time period in Britain, there was also a lot of distrust in the government. And so I think Kneale was, pushing these buttons a bit, and that just made it into there. And again, there's lots of those examples of movies and books from that from the 50s.
Well, I'm trying to think of the movies that we're citing right now. Most of those seem to take place kind of in small towns, small communities. This is like at a higher level where, the higher ups in the British government have been taken over as well. Like civil servants and head of military branches, they are all they all are under control by the aliens now. And that makes it a much more dangerous and kind of sinister outlook.
Well, the other thing, and I don't know if it's social commentary or just a new twist on how to resolve the alien problem, but something I thought was very fascinating was at the end of the movie, they deal with, and maybe this goes back to some of the other stories that we're talking about, although I don't recall it. When the aliens are vanquished by basically being exposed to the oxygen in Earth's atmosphere, they die, these giant, like sludgy mutant monsters coming out of the dome. But then all of their subjects, the people that have been taken over, the marks disappear and they are restored to their regular human selves with no memory of what had happened. That's very much like you'd see in a vampire movie, like when you take out the head vampire. I'd never seen that applied to an alien context.
Right. And I will say, I feel like it's a bit of a cheat because, if you have a physical scar, that doesn't just magically go away. It's kind of like when, David Stubble disappears in The Lost Boys. I was like, I don't know if that doesn't quite track.
Well, we don't know how long. Maybe someone had come. Jamie Gertz had gone over and secretly like shaved him right beforehand because she was very loving or lugging. It's strange. I feel like I need to go back maybe and revisit this movie to appreciate it more because being half awake, I don't know that I gave it a fair shake, and I did not mean to rhyme there. However, my impression is I think also because we are returning to Hammerland. Hammer to me has a certain cachet, and I know it's unfair to say, well, it's not like the gothic kind of monster movies we're talking about, but I'm looking at, this movie has a production designer. And aside from like the office setting, I'm wondering what did they do? Because they're using this giant refinery. It just seems, maybe that's the point of it. It seems very sterile, very pipey, and there's people running around with guns towards the end and everything. That's kind of exciting, but just the whole like feel of the film, the vibe, the look of it, it just didn't feel like any other Hammer film I'd watched.
And I would say that is true. And I think that's one of the things I like about it is that for me, it conjures kind of an Orwellian look, that kind of stark black and white. We don't see that ever again. Like that is not an area that they traffic in, except for like when we look into their black and white thrillers. But this setting, and you're right. I mean, they did use that newly constructed Shell refinery as their setting, and of course, I think they were trying to get the most out of it. But I think there's something to be said for Bernard Robinson's work in the various offices that are visited. It doesn't compare at all to his work on the Dracula films, the Frankenstein films. But I guess that credit still where, that he was able to do more than just that. And this is also the same year that A Curse of Frankenstein came out. So this was, basically this was the year they kind of exploded onto the international scene.
There is a control room set where they've escaped to.
Right.
But it isn't all that. I mean, it almost looks like that could have been part of the real refinery.
Right.
Except, you don't have portals to look at, giant monsters through.
Yeah. Help me out with the monsters. What did they, because they all just kind of looked like these amorphous blobs with almost
Yeah.
like stumpy little tentacles. Did they even have eyes, or I couldn't quite tell what the anatomy of these things were. Did you pick this out, or did they actually have a form, or are they just kind of mushy?
I think they were kind of mushy. They're similar to what Karun turns into at the end of the first Quatermass movie, that kind of blobby thing, which is also X the Unknown, which was the film between these two Quatermass movies. Same kind of blob monster. I do like that we get, Phil Leakey, the makeup guy, is doing like those little marks, but he also we get a full body melt at one point where the guy's like come. And I remember seeing that image in several reference books growing up and just being like, oh, wow, what is that movie? I got to see that.
Well, I gotta say that was pretty spectacular. I was up and alert for that scene, because yeah, the guy comes out, he's completely covered in this black goo, and there was so much of this on him that I'd probably have to go back and see it again. But at one point when he's kind of stumbling around and headed, towards Quatermass, there's a chunk that seems to fall off of him. I couldn't tell if that was just like supposed to be oil or a limb, because it was really, really gruesome. I mean, this is 56 we're talking about here, but it's so evocative of body terror that I was totally swept up, and I was like, yeah, this movie's really going somewhere, and it was just back to the refinery and in circles.
I really am kind of curious about, from what I understand, the shot where he's looking into the dome and seeing that stuff move around. What I've read is that was like just sticks and dirt and bags and stuff that people were sort of pushing around.
Yeah, kind of puppeting from underneath.
But the final monsters, as they were, I think they were guys inside of there walking around. In one shot, it looks like you can see like feet, big flat feet on the things as this thing is sort of stepping out of the and so I mean that could have just been made out of anything. I doubt that it was made. I think it was probably something that was made out of whatever scraps they could find. And I think it's fairly effective looking in the way it's lit and photographed, and it is pretty disgusting.
Yeah.
But
that's
been something that, like with some of these British films, the monsters always just turn out to be blobs, and it was kind of like, I want my monsters to have a little more going on.
Well, that's interesting, because I'm thinking about the monsters or the aliens and what they want, what their plan is, because if they're building size ultimately, and they send out these little spores to take over people, like are they gonna pop out of people and grow into these giant things? Like, what's the plan here? And also, I had the same problem with M. Night Shyamalan's Signs. Like, they travel to Earth, they are intelligent creatures, but they didn't do any homework and find out that it's all oxygen and rain. There's a lot of rain on this 70% water planet. I just wondered, do you guys have any insights into this, or maybe you've read something on what their goal was?
Quatermass does say when they're looking at the various gases that are being pumped into these domes, he says, notice that one of them is oxygen. And his theory is that they are trying to adapt to an oxygen atmosphere. And that's why they have, then they shut off all the other gases and just start pumping oxygen in there in an attempt to kill the things. But I thought that made a little bit of sense. But yeah, as far as plans go, it's more about ask the aliens. And the asteroid.
Quatermass and the gassy aliens. I like that.
We're never really understood like what this asteroid that's circling like the Earth, that's sort of controlling things, is all about. It's like, well, are there more of them up there? Is that like some homeworld, or?
Well, the impression I got was
the way they destroy them is like almost perfunctory in the movie. In the serial, it's like
They actually
the second
go.
or the last half hour is all devoted to getting the rocket to blow up the asteroid. I was just reading it in
There you
this.
go.
There we go.
That is a shiny vintage paperback. That is in great condition.
These are I've got all three scripts. They've been published a number of times. I found these are British. Actually, they probably aren't even American editions, but I found these at a bookstore in the 80s. And actually, that's the first time that I had ever heard of Quatermass 2 or the Quatermass Experiment, because I had only seen
Quatermass in the Pit.
Yeah, or 5 million years.
Or 5 million years to Earth.
Yeah. As that time. And I also found the novelization of the final chapters,
yep.
which is really good, by the way. Much better than the actual serial, I think. That's
is
another.
It true that? Well, I was wondering if it's true that the original title for Quatermass 2 was 5 million years to the end credits. Anyway, sorry. I stepped over you. I waited way too long for that joke, Bill. There you go. No, the other thing about like the aliens, I think if we'd had more time to even just have people theorizing about what they're doing, because I just thought about this as you were explaining the whole immersing themselves, gradually exposing themselves to oxygen so they can kind of like live on our planet. I mean, I'm thinking that's sort of what they're doing with the human beings and taking over their bodies, right? They are living inside literal skin suits.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so what does that mean? Are they drones and these giant things are the kings? I don't know, or queens?
The zombies or the people that are taken over also have to have those, tubes and things on their back line up with a gas mask that's also giving them some of that methane, nitrogen, whatever atmosphere. And so it seemed like all you had to do is pull one of those things off of a person or off one of the zombies, and that would kill them, which is a little weird because at the end, the guy is okay and everything is happy.
Well, yeah, and you bring up a good point about this this sort of giant meteor that's orbiting the Earth and ostensibly, I guess, sending down these little spores, and they blow it up. And Quatermass at the end, when he's talking about writing this up on the report, wondering if it's going to be the final report. So yeah, this kind of the dun 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 of the sequel, which they wouldn't have a follow up feature film until 10 years later. Which is kind of odd with a different actor. How was this movie received in terms of, Quatermass 2, I guess, or Quatermass Experiment was popular enough that it warranted a sequel.
Right.
So what was the reception to the second one?
So the thing is that like this, at 55, when Quatermass Experiment came out, that was still kind of early in the sci-fi wave. We just had them. We just had some of the, This Island Earth. But once we get into 57, like the drive-ins are flooded with sci-fi. And so it's easy to see how this one might have gotten lost in the shuffle, especially with its kind of banal Americanized title, Enemy from Space. I can see why it might not have resonated as much as the zillion other sci-fi films that were coming out in 57 and 58. One fun little trivia fact is that Quatermass 2 is the first, I believe, UK film to use the number 2 as a sequel.
Oh.
Like it had never been done before. They'd always named it something else so that it was part of a series. But this is the first time they just went, it's 2. It's the second one.
Wow. I read that Nigel Kneale was trying to come up with a title for it. I mean, this is when he's writing the serial, and he just couldn't come up with anything better, and so he just went with it.
Yeah, Quatermass 2, and again, it was groundbreaking in that way, even though it's kind of like the easy button to hit.
No.
That reminds me of two things. One is Mad Magazine parodies. When they used to do sequels, they would just add 2, but it would be TOO, like
right.
Beverly Hills Cop 2.
This as well.
Right. And then the other thing is the movie True Romance, where they're talking about the Vietnam movie Coming Home in a Body Bag, which is like this big Oscar-winning thing. And some producer announces, "Oh, we're going to make a sequel." And then it's like, "What are you going to call it?" And he said, "They're thinking about Body Bags 2." And I think the comeback was, "I've got more taste in my penis." Anyway, that's this is the adult portion of the show, which we're gradually moving out of. So, yeah, Quatermass 2, nah, not a fan. But
And
that's
then,
an interesting bit of trivia, though.
well, and the second bit of trivia is this the first sci-fi horror film in which we see Hammer veteran Michael Ripper.
Yes.
And Michael Ripper would show up many, many, many more times if you have walked the road to Hammerland.
How old was he in this movie? Do we know?
I don't. I'm sorry.
Because he alternately looked like he was 21 and 45. I can't.
And that's the gift that is Michael Ripper.
And he's got, I saw his name in the opening credits and I got really excited. And then when I saw him, he was all kind of like a youngish, did he have lines? I mean, he was kind of basically a supporting kind of member of the survival mob at the end. Yeah, he had kind of a part, but it was cool to see him and see him so young, but I was also like, I want my Michael Ripper. But got to start somewhere. Yeah, so I don't know what I'm trying to figure out, like, what else is there to talk about with Quatermass 2, because I watched it. I feel like I got everything out of it, but thanks to you guys, I'm filling in some of the, I guess, the history and the context. It's making me appreciate it more. I don't know that I would enjoy it more on a second time around, but I feel like I do need to give it a shot. But what else am I missing here? What can we talk about?
I don't know that you're missing much. I think it is kind of it is more of the same in many regards, and because it was a hit, the first one, when the Quatermass Experiment was a hit, this seemed like the natural thing to do was to create another one that doesn't stray too far, that does give us our same actor, gives us our same director, Val Guest. So yeah, I don't know that you're missing much, but you do see why I might have hopped over this one to get to Quatermass in the Pit. But I think this is a worthwhile one to pick up as well. And I would recommend anybody else who does enjoy these films to check out X the Unknown, which is the 1956 one. I think that's it started off as a Quatermass movie, and then they asked Nigel Kneale if they could use the name Quatermass, and he said no, and so they had to call the scientist something else. But that was the idea. It was going to be a Quatermass movie in '56, and but because of that, they called it, X the Unknown.
I think X the Unknown is a better film.
I would agree.
Than this or Quatermass Experiment?
I have one story that I gleaned from looking at some of the interviews at the end of the disc that I thought was pretty funny. Apparently, when they were shooting the scenes at the end where you have after the domes have exploded and the people on the road, the car blows over, all that. They instructed Brian Donleavy he had to face a certain direction, one direction all the time. And he did it fine until one take, and he turned and his toupee blew off.
Yep.
And was floating around, and people were trying to get it with broomsticks and stuff. And apparently they had a spare toupee for him. But that was the first time I had heard that he wore a toupee.
I had forgotten that story. Well, the other thing is that Brian Donleavy was apparently a bit of an alcoholic.
I've heard that.
So he would have to have his scenes done early, and there were often times where he would have to be told what the name of the movie was, what the scene was, that they would have to have big cue cards set up so he could just read his lines off of them. So.
And I've also, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I have heard that Nigel Kneale hated this film. So even though he wrote the initial screenplay,
right.
But he tried to get like every print destroyed. I've got that from one friend of mine. and I don't know where his source is from that, because it seems kind of well, impossible that he could do something like that.
Right.
But
I find a lot of the time what I read from Nigel Kneale is a lot of blowhard. It's like,
yeah,
you know, like I don't know what to believe of that guy because he
he
just
is an
seemed,
interesting guy.
yeah,
And there's a lot of other things of his that I need to watch. Unfortunately, most of them are done for the BBC. The copies are all like third, fourth generation. Some of them are up on YouTube. There's a pretty creepy ghost story called The Stone Tape,
oh, wonderful.
and but unfortunately the visual quality isn't so great. There's another story.
I feel like there has been a physical release of the Stone Tape.
Maybe.
So I would see if you can find it on DVD or Blu-ray because yeah,
Mhm.
that's a really terrific story. Sorry to interrupt.
There's another one called, or a series of 6 episodes called Beasts that are, from what I've read, are pretty creepy and pretty strange. There's another ghost story called The Road, in which people hear screams at the end of this road, and in the end, because they think it's ghosts from the past, but at the end of the story, they realize no, that an atomic bomb will go off there in the future, and these are actually screams from the future.
Wow, I love that.
So, I mean, his concepts and things are really, really interesting. And then there's that weird, the Year of the Sex Olympics that is, predicts reality television a little too closely. I haven't seen that one either, but
Well,
I love it if this stuff got some kind of a proper restoration, or or at least like something out there, because it's kind of hard to find this stuff.
Well, the BBC were, notoriously bad at preserving their TV stuff,
Oh, yeah.
especially.
They would just tape over stuff. That's why
Right.
there's hardly any of the old Doctor Who shows
Right.
from and they're like recreating them with cartoons and things because they
Yeah.
still have the audio, but it's like, well, nobody's ever going to want to watch this again.
Well, that's what happened with the first Quatermass experiment miniseries. Is they literally taped over it. It's like,
There's
all right.
2 episodes that survived somehow,
Right,
but
right.
um,
Probably
yeah.
because some nerd in the control room went, "No, we have to have this."
Well, that's the case with Monty Python's Flying Circus. That was almost erased until Terry Gilliam, I believe, went in and said, "Yeah, I'll buy this stuff from you." And
Wow.
it's like, it's hard to think about now, but you would think, well, these guys are sitting on a fortune here,
Right,
and
right.
they're just to save a few pounds
Yep.
in recording tape, they're just throwing that all away.
Well, and also the idea now,
who's going to
one
watch this
master.
again? So
Yeah.
anyway,
Well, and yeah, it's unfathomable. But I would think that there's such a like geek fan community, like I would assume kind of globally that someone could still make a fortune off this if they could find it and restore it. Hell, just make it publicly available so people can do their own restorations. Well, I guess you said some of the stuff is on YouTube, so that may be worth
Yeah.
looking up. But Bill, if it weren't a spoiler, I would say that Screams from the Future would be a great
Ooh.
name for a sci-fi movie instead of The Road. I mean, I get it, but I'm just thinking of the Cormac McCarthy novel.
that
Yeah,
was one that was lost. I think there's an audio drama of it out there somewhere. But
Oh wow, that'd be cool.
it's also set in like Victorian times or something, or maybe Elizabethan or something. So it's even, it's like a gothic ghost story, but
And in foreshadowing the modern future. That's cool.
right.
but I was going to say, but at the end, when someone says, "Oh my gosh, these are screams from an atomic bomb," does someone say, "What the hell's an atomic
What's an
bomb?"
atomic bomb?
I haven't heard it yet, so I don't know, but I imagine it's
When they say mushroom cloud, do they mean like an actual cloud of mushrooms?
Maybe.
I mean, I know what mushrooms are.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah.
Um, man. Um, well, I think that it's about time to close this chapter on Return to Hammerland. I'm glad that we talked about Quatermass 2 because I am a completist and a collector at heart. Speaking of collections, I know there's individual releases of these because Bill, we watched Quatermass 2 on a Blu-ray that you have. Have they collected the feature films into a set yet?
They are owned by separate, at least at this time. Quatermass in the Pit and Quatermass 2 were both released by Shout Factory.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe it's Kino Lorber that has Quatermass Experiment. And so
Oh,
that's
okay.
why they are not joined together. But there's also a collection of the teleplays, the BBC, that you can get what Bill was referring to, where you get the last 2 episodes of Quatermass Experiment, and then there's the 6-part teleplays of Quatermass 2 and Quatermass in the Pit. And Quatermass in the Pit is played by none other than Andre Morel,
Mm-hmm.
who we will see show up in several Hammer Gothics, including The Reptile. And I think he's also in one of the vampire movies, and I'm blanking on which one right now.
Okay. Wait a second. We talked about The Reptile, right?
Yes,
AC?
talked about The Reptile and the Gorgon.
Okay. Yes, we did that. It was a double feature, wasn't it? I
Well,
think.
they both out the same year. I think we talked about them on two separate shows, but
Okay. Yeah.
I lumped them together because they're both directed by John Gilling and they're both set in Cornwall.
Because when you said The Reptile, I was thinking of the Gorgon. So yeah, I don't know. But anyhow, thank you guys very much. Oh, yeah, sure.
Plague of the Zombies is the one I'm thinking of.
Plague of the Zombies. Okay.
Which we also.
Yes. So I don't know what we're talking about next time. I don't think we've actually figured that out, and I got to get on the ball as far as making an actual schedule. But time means nothing. But you know what does mean something? These conversations, at least to me. I'm glad you guys were able to join me. I'm glad you guys were finally able to meet.
Yes,
everyone's coming together to talk about Quatermass 2.
Looking forward to more Hammer talk.
Yes, we'll have to do a big get together where we watch a movie and talk about it. Maybe even without cameras, and just hang out. I know, Bill. Shocking. All right. Well, anyway, everybody out there, if you liked this show, please like and subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. All of that good stuff. Be sure and check out my dear friends AC and Bill. All their information is down below. Subscribe to their stuff. AC, you've almost got too much to subscribe to and keep up. Are you doing daily content at this point, man?
I try. No, the answer is no. I'm not doing daily content, but
I think you are, and you're trying to get out of a lie, sir.
Swing by the YouTube channel and see what we are creating, though. That would be great fun.
All right. And Bill, you're modeling away on something or other all the time. So where can people check out your stuff?
At billskitchen.com. I don't know. You have the link down there, right?
Yes, I do. I just want if there was anything else.
.com and maybe something index or I don't know.
I did take a look at your stuff and well done. I was wondering if you were going to be at Facets because they were showing Godzilla versus the Smog Monster this past weekend, and I knew you'd just done your Godzilla. Piece.
I had watched that with my wife about a year or so ago. Afterwards, she said something like, "That's the only time that Godzilla does that flying thing, right?" Like, yes.
You're like, sadly, yes.
Yeah. Well, we won't get into it. But my friend Barry Kaufman, I guess, was hosting that. I don't know if you know him or not.
I do. He's great. Yeah, he's been on the show a couple times.
I mean, I've known him for over 40 years now. And,
I used to go to his House of Monsters back when it was a physical location, and that's where I met him for the first time.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, it was quite possibly that we were both there at the same time then, because I would head out there fairly regularly. And he comes over to my house for dinner like once a month, possibly even this Saturday. You let me know, Barry.
Yes, Barry, definitely
anyway.
to put a note in the comments. Are you going to Bill's for dinner?
That's right. It's
Um,
important.
No, that would be crazy if you guys were both at the House of Horrors at the same time. It reminds me, my friend and colleague David Fowley and I, turns out we went to the same Ernest Borgnine book signing a number of years ago at Borders on Michigan Avenue, RIP, for both Borders and Mr. Borgnine. But we had no idea. We didn't know each other then. Anyhow, we're going to stop reminiscing and move on down the road as we would continue our return to Hammerland. A couple months, check back here. We'll be talking about something or other, something scary, something better than this movie. I kid. This is a fine feature film or something. Anyway, guys, thank you very much. And all of you out there, thank you for watching, and take care.